We've all done it, haven't we? We found a perfect track plan for our next layout. Or have we? Let me explain. So in some ways I'm no different to anybody else. I'm quite happy to sit there and noodle around with a track plan that I found. Maybe something in a magazine, maybe something that I found in a book, and think that, oh yes, that's a layout that I would like to build. But what I then tend to do is to go into design mode. There's some very old videos on this channel about designing a model railway layout, very much along the lines of starting with a concept and a design and then moving forward until you finally end up with the perfect thing that you're going to build. And within that process there are two distinctive phases. The first one is really kind of the concept of what are you trying to get at and what am I going to build here, and that tends to be, oh, I'm going to build something in 009, or I'm going to build a Great Western Station, and it includes the space you've got available and the time and everything else, and maybe you've got some stuff that you're going to use. So then off you might go with your pencil and paper, or maybe even your AnyRail design package, and you start putting your layout ideas together. Well, yeah, that's when I go into what I call the three-legged stool syndrome. Now the three-legged stool, as you'd expect, covers off three basic elements: the track plan itself, the electrical connections and the design of that track plan, and then the operation of that layout based on that track plan. And what I do is to look at the plan, wire it up on paper, and then in my head try and run some trains based on that track plan. So can I run a train? Can I run round? Have I got enough length? Can I hold an engine in a certain place while another train does something, etc., etc. Now you can imagine on a layout the size of Yarslow that by the time you've looked at your stopping passengers in and out of Trinity Square, then the stuff running around the main line, the stuff that's got to go through Yarslow, stuff that's going up and down the branch, there's an awful lot of different types of trains, and clearly if you change one aspect of the three-legged stool, be it the track plan or the electrical design or the operating design, it does affect the other two. More often than not, you change the track plan because you find that, oh, hang on a minute, if I run round there, I could do with somewhere to put the engine, so I'll just drop a siding here, and then you find, well, how's that going to be powered? Right, I need an isolator there, perhaps. Bear in mind, I'm analog DC, and so it goes on. So you end up with many, many versions of the layout, each one a progression of the last. Now, to avoid this situation where you think that everything I ever do is to do with the Yarslow model railway, I'm going to continue by talking about a design that I put together a couple of years ago. Derek Naylor is a legend in the narrow gauge world, and he built the Aire Valley Railway back in the 70s in narrow gauge, and this plan is based heavily on it. Port Framley, in my case, is a canal wharf enabling stone to be unloaded, which has come down the valley from the Lambton Quarry, which is to the top left of this layout. So you've got the main line going up and down the valley from Port Framley round to Lambton, and there's also a branch line, if you will, that goes off to Hogglestock. Now along the way, leaving Port Framley, there is a road that goes off to Lufton Hall. It's Lord Lufton who owns and runs this railway, so he's got his own private station at Lufton Hall. Uffley Junction is the place where the Hogglestock branch splits off, and then you've got Beechwood, which is a little timber yard, and eventually right up to Lambton, and the quarry is off scene. The quarry and the loading facilities here both dealt with cartridges. So this design has been mulled over for a couple of years, and I'm now in a place where I think every siding on this layout is exactly where it should be, and operationally and electrically and in terms of track plan design, this layout is as good as it's going to get. But why? Why do I think that? Let's talk about some of the processes that I've gone through in order to get to the point where I think this layout is as good as it's going to get to. Now I'm going to start with a very simple example here, and this is driven operationally. Each of the section colours you see here represents one controller. So the green line here that passes through Beechwood platform is part of the main line that has Uffley Junction further down the valley one way and Lambton and its quarry further up the valley the other. Now Beechwood platform itself is only a very small platform there to serve the workers at the timber yard and perhaps some fishermen who might want to go do a bit of fishing, and there's a small bridge over a tributary of the main River Nail that runs down the valley here. And what you've got is two sidings serving the timber yard coming off the main line. Now that seems simple enough, but actually in terms of the operation there's quite a lot going on here. For a start, the platform itself is just a platform, nothing more. The length of the platform is probably enough to cover the occasional trains that come down the branch. I think there is a Board of Trade ruling that even halts and small platforms must be at least one coach long. That's in the back of my memory somewhere, I couldn't quote that. So this is a sort of platform that's going to be long enough to serve one coach on the narrow gauge train. The two sidings themselves, two sidings always better than one because it means you can shunt around. Three is better than two, I have to say, but we haven't got space for three here, so we've only got two. So you've got something alongside the building bottom left here, and then a spare siding. And the whole siding array itself faces down the valley. That's the way the traffic is going to go. The loaded wagons are going to leave Beechwood timber yard and travel down to Uffley Junction, eventually end up at Port Framley to be shipped off somewhere else. The empties are going to have to come on a train to Lambton, then be looped and then returned on a freight from Lambton, and whilst the freight train sits in Beechwood, the empties shunted into the timber yard. Two other things to note here. Firstly, the blind siding, which protects the main line from whatever's in the timber yard, and secondly, for operational interest, the permanent way siding, which is the other side of the river and the other side of the bridge, faces the other way. That means that you can stop empty trains coming from Lambton to shunt empties into the timber yard. You've got freight trains stopping to pick up freight from the timber yard going down to Port Framley, but going in the other direction you can stop permanent way trains to shunt that very short siding that leads down to the river. Let's take something a bit more of an exotic example now. This is Port Framley, which is heavily based on Derek Naylor's layout. But you'll see here, this is it's got three sections to this station. We've got the red section, which represents the main line trains. We've got that browny purple section, which represents the loading facilities going across the canal. And we've got the purple section, which deal with the loco sheds and workshops. Let's start with the basic track plan. The red line comes in, runs into a platform and has a run round. You'd expect that at a passenger platform. There's also a bay. The reason for the bay is that the rail car that comes down from Hogglestock needs somewhere to sit. It normally only runs to Uffley Junction, but on market days, of course, it comes all the way into Port Framley. If it sits in the platform, then any other passenger trains can't get in. So the bay allows that rail car somewhere to sit. You've got a few sidings for local freight traffic. The one bottom left that sits by the trees away from the goods shed was originally intended as a permanent way siding, but you could use any one of the sidings there for permanent way traffic. On the right hand side, facing the other way, the saloon shed, this is where the private coach of Lord Lufton lives. So an engine would come out of the engine shed, pick up that saloon, run it into the platform, a quick run round, and off it goes. And then Lord Lufton has got his own train, or you could run round that coach and put it into the back of the bay, and it can be attached to the front or back of a passenger train for his own personal use. The engine sheds themselves face the other way. It's just a good use of space, isn't it, so that you can fill that gap with the loco sheds and the workshops. There's enough shed space, incidentally, between the shed here, the shed at Lambton Quarry, and the small shed at Hogglestock to cover all of the proposed engines that are going to be on the line. So I've done an operational timetable here, and based on that timetable and based on the number of locomotives that I'm likely to want, the engine sheds can cope with that. And of course the turntable is big enough for the largest of all those engines. The quarry line here, quarry stuff coming in from Lambton is shunted into or bored into the head shunt by the canal engine, and then it can run, it's got a siding down beside the loco sheds, or it can go across the river and it can shunt into any one of the two loading bays, which are in fact cartridges here, in order to dispose of the contents of the wagons. And that can operate totally independently of both the mauve and the red line. Similarly, an engine can come out of the loco workshops and go on the shed independent of the main line. So operationally we have three sections here, and that's important. It means you've got more going on if you want it. The cartridge thing, incidentally, means that when the loaded wagons are put in the cartridge behind the loading buildings, you simply take the cartridge out and swap it across and put it back in the quarry, and the empties which were taken up to the quarries, that cartridge is swapped back to the canal end. So the engine eventually pulls out a load of empties, sticks it back onto a train going from Port Family back to Lambton, and it looks like empties are going back. So you've got two circuits here. You've got the empties going clockwise and the loadeds going anti-clockwise. Nothing gets unloaded, you just swap the cartridges around when you get to the top of the layout. Now, one or two other things that have had a lot of thought gone into them but may not appear so. Loughton Hall Halt, a couple of sidings there for dealing with perhaps traffic up to the hall and the platform itself. The platform and the sidings are on the hall side of the track. That means that anybody getting off, particularly Lord Loughton, getting off at the private platform can simply be collected by his chauffeur and taken up the road back to the hall without having to wait the ignominy of the level crossing gates having to open. And similarly, he can send his man down to the sidings to pick up whatever it is that's arrived for him from the port. And of course the sidings face in such a way that it's first stop out of Port Family, so if something important has arrived on the wharf, it gets brought down by the first train and parked in the sidings without having to go to Lambton and back. Just got to keep the owner happy, haven't we? Similarly, on the other side of the layout, there is a chapel up in the hill, and on Sunday the local train stops at Chapel Halt for the locals to attend church, and of course the Chapel Halt is on the chapel side of the line. At Hoggle End Halt, which is on the Hogglestock branch, you would expect traffic going there really to be dropped off rather than collected. It's a little halt that serves maybe a few farmhouses. They're not producing anything going out by rail, but they're probably going to expect things coming in, foodstuffs, feed, seed, that kind of thing. So a train coming from Uffley Junction calls at Hoggle End, parks perhaps an odd van in the bay and sets off. So the siding is facing the right way for that traffic, an important consideration. And don't design complications where you don't need them. The wagon works at Uffley is literally the wagon works, and if you've got a wagon that isn't running very well, that's where it ends up. So repaints, maintenance, all that kind of stuff. It needs to be nothing more than a head shunt and a few sidings. There's no point having a kickback facing the wrong way here to make things awkward. They simply wouldn't lay the sidings out in that way. So you've got the wagon works engine is pulling stuff in and out of the works and in and out of the paint shop. Note that the boiler house and the coal siding, which is the one nearest the main line, is furthest away from the paint shop. You don't want paint dust, coal dust rather, in your freshly painted wagons. Well, I could go on and on about every siding and every foot of track on this layout, because I've gone through that in my head dozens of times, but I won't. I'll leave you to do a freeze frame when you get to the track plan, so that you can have a look at why you can work out yourself why the track plan is the way it is. But just a few thoughts on putting your track plans together. Don't simply draw it out, and if it looks pretty, think that's what I'm going to do. What you need to think about is, how am I going to wire this up? How electrically is it going to change what I want to do? And more importantly, operationally, is this what the railway would do? Because the railway will do it the simplest way the railway can do it. And if you do that often enough, and if you keep going over your plan and over your plan, over your plan, you'll end up with something that isn't quite what you started with, but operationally is far more realistic. I hope that will make sense. I'll see you soon.